All right. So I thought a few days ago that I wanted to say something about generations, but then it took me quite a while to think, well, what do I want to say? And but anyway, recently some inspirations flooded through. So first of all, just a reading. This is a reading from the book of Job, 8:8-10. Please inquire of past generations and consider the things searched out by their fathers. For we are only of yesterday and know nothing, because our days on the earth are as a shadow. Will they not teach you and tell you and bring forth words from their minds? And then another reading from Genesis, chapter 5. When God created mankind, he made them in the likeness of God. He created them, male and female, and blessed them. And he named them mankind when they were created. And when Adam had lived 130 years, he had a son in his own likeness, in his own image, and he named him Seth. And it goes on to the many generations of Adam after that. So there's a number of reasons why I want to talk about generations. Basically two personal ones and one more to do with the movement and our recent experience. The personal reasons are my father passed away last December, and he was the last of his generation. My uncle and aunt passed away a few years ago, and my mother passed away 12 years ago. So it just opens up a new sort of realization. I'm now the leading generation in my family. And then, as you might know, we're expecting a new generation, personally. Narumi's pregnant and due this week. So any time now, a new generation. And this boy will be the first in the generation of all of our families, my brothers, Narumi's husband's family, and all the way across. This baby will be the first. So those are the personal reasons for thinking about generations. And the other thing is the involvement of the second generation and third generation of our movement and the connection between our generations, which was particularly a significant point to me in the summer camp. And then I realized that, of course, it's rather significant at the moment. We've got three generations here. So I hope I can speak to all three generations and not bore the third one. So when Father speaks about generations, and when we read in the principle about the four-position foundation, and you get that picture of father, mother, children, God at the center, and then family, society, nation, world. It all looks very automatic, and to a certain degree, Father liked to think that once a certain thing is established, then it will automatically expand and spread. And there's clearly a truth in that. In that once we do something good, we make a foundation, then sooner or later something good comes out of it. But it's not quite as automatic as that. So this idea of lineage, and the Genesis passage talks about us as in the image of God, and then Seth is in the image of Adam, and then we're each in the image of our parents, which is absolutely true. And so there's two aspects of that. So I'll come to that in a second. But so my main point is about the connection between the generations and the passing on, the inheritance, the relationship between the generations. And of course, there is a natural principle of inheritance. We inherit the appearance, the character, many aspects of life of our parents. And we look at the trees and the birds and all things around us, and I'll leave that bit of the topic to Jeff another time. But I think about what Jeff told me about the yew tree and how it sort of seeds its own generation and it keeps itself going for thousands of years. But all the things of nature show us ways in which things are inherited. But when we think about that, then it's clear there are two principles at work here. One is of continuation and imitation. So things pass on the imitation or the image of the previous thing. But also there's a principle of progress and development. So the first principle is well understood biologically. The process of reproduction passes on the same DNA, and that kind of identity means that apple trees make apple seeds, and apple seeds make apple trees, and that keeps going. So that's a continuity, and the same thing gets passed on. Squirrels make squirrels, and human beings give birth to human beings. But the second aspect is less well understood about progress and development, although the result is clear to see. Simple life forms evolved into more complex life forms, and species diversified. So there is a creative or developmental principle behind the way things that progress. And in the same way, we as human beings, we imitate our parents, but we also want to learn from the past, and we want to do better. We want to make progress. We want to do something new. We don't just want to be the same. I mean, I noticed, especially spending a lot of time with my father last year, and having a lot of time to talk with him, I realized more and more, yes, I'm becoming my father. And this is part of it. Look at my brothers; they're exactly the same. But it's also in character, and many of the things we learn, and many of the ways in which we behave, is we just become a chip off the old block. We do really inherit a lot from the past. But we want to do something better if we can. We want to learn, and we want to make our own creative contribution to life. And so that's inherent, really, in all things. I think that's what the principle means by inherent directive nature. It's not only the nature of being the same again, but wanting to go further, wanting to do more. Of course, if you look at human history, we muddy the water. The whole principle, we make it so much more difficult to recognize that there is progress, because the reality is we undo the progress of the past again and again. We unlearn the lessons from the past. Either we simply don't learn anything, but oftentimes we actually destroy the benefits from the past. And if you look at the burning of the library at Alexandria, or all kinds of mass murders and wars and so on that delete whole portions of history or try to destroy cultures, it's a horrendous reversal process where great advances had been made and then they get lost. And so, history is full of those things. The relationship between what we describe as the first, second, and third Israels. So the Jewish culture and tradition was in many ways just pushed aside by the Christian church, because that relationship wasn't kept between the early Christians and the Jewish foundation. And so the Christian church grew up to a large degree in quite opposition to Judaism and Jewish culture, and awful things happened right up to last century, and that was a fundamental unlearning of a foundation that had been made that wasn't then passed on. And so we can see many of the shortcomings of Christian culture because it doesn't have that root. And then we're also in the same danger of doing the same ourselves. of not inheriting from the Christian culture and the Jewish culture. This is meant to be God's lineage of in the providence of restoration, passing on something that we can build on, that we can make better. So the process of generations, looking at it on that big picture, in these sort of long periods of history, is quite significant. But it does come down to very personal relationships. So we look at the early Christian church, the relationship between Peter and Paul. You can see that actually the roots of that split were right there in terms of the Jewish and Christian cultures. And we ourselves, are involved with lots of very personal relationships where, our connection or lack of it can make a big difference in terms of what is passed on and what is it that we build on. So the relationship between one generation and the next, as Father says, the core principle of the universe is the parent-child relationship. So that's easily said, but much harder to achieve success in, and I'm sure true parents themselves are painfully aware, and not just Sun Myung Moon and Hak Jahan, but any true parents, any parents who aim to be true, will find it painfully difficult to pass on their heritage and what they would like their children to learn. It's not a simple process. It's not an automatic process. So looking at the relationship between the generations within our movement, we, talking about older people like myself, as the first generation, many of us, started off by making a split from our parents. I mean, certainly I talk for myself as having joined in California, and there was, quite a strong tendency to say, forget about your parents. And you can easily pick out a bit of the principle and say, well, those are the false parents, and here's your true parents. And it sort of makes it rather black and white. Although I'm sure that's not true parents' desire. But anyway, that was very much what happened. And in fact, one of the things which happened because of my father passing away was we've been clearing out his house, and I came across a box file of papers. And these were all the letters that had been between me and my parents at the time when I joined the church. And it's quite painful reading, to be honest. But there's letters to lots of different people. I mean, to Professor Jones in Aberdeen, to some other professor in Aberdeen University, Eileen Barker and Mike Marshall and Mose Durst, and all kinds of communications. And when I read it, I'm moved because my parents tried so hard to understand what I was doing, how to keep their connection with me, and it was a very difficult time. Anyway, my reflection is that many of us in the first generation, we had that break with our parents, and in a way, of course, how do you start a new tradition? How do you establish yourself with a different sense of faith and understanding? It is difficult, and it's there's no way around it. And actually, it was interesting. Many of those letters that I read, that concept was expressed very, very well by some of these well-educated people like Eileen Barker and this professor in Aberdeen. So, we're starting our faith based on separating from our parents was clearly not a very good message when we come to the point of what relationship do we want to have with our children. But anyway, so Father sent us to hometown. I think, I certainly felt since I came back from Russia, I was making the efforts to undo the painful separation from my parents. I suppose it was even before that. From particularly from the time when Vitas was born, that was like really the key moment where my parents were desperately wanting to have an identity with Vitas, because he was the first grandchild in that generation for all of my family. Um, so there's a lot of water under the bridge on that, and I feel we did a lot. I was able to see some of these letters I read with my mum before she died, and I was really I'm really glad that I did, and understood at least some of the things that she'd been through. Um, so we we had to repair those relationships, because also that's part of the way we're demonstrating to our own children, what's good relationship between parents and children. Um, so yeah, I think that does, it's a bit of a difficult point to get over, but that's what we're working on, and I think many of the ways in which there's a difficult relationship between the first and second generation in our movement. Uh, it is rooted in that we didn't, we made the separation ourselves, and we didn't repair it. So yeah, there are many challenges along the way in terms of those relationships between all our generations. Um, so in terms of the summer camp, it's been a great avenue for me to to learn things, to grow, to have an engagement with the community and with the other generations. And so, last year, Miwa and Sersha and Achan took responsibility for organizing the summer camp. And I found that very difficult last year, because I didn't know what they were doing, and I had so much I wanted to pass on. I've got a great big computer file of all the past experiences of 20 years of doing the summer camp, and I wanted them to understand. Well, there are these risks. Be careful. You're dealing with young children. You're taking care of them in the absence of their parents. It's a big responsibility, and I felt they don't understand that. So there was a certain amount of tension between us last year, and I found it quite difficult to manage it. So approaching this year, I've thought about that a lot, and it's the same situation. They were the ones doing all the organising, and it took a long time for me to get information from them as to what was organised, and what needed to be done, what were the bits that were missing, and could I give you these risk assessments you can have a look at, that kind of thing. But we got there, and I learned this basic thing, which I think I learned from, I think all of us learned who had teenage children so far, that you go through a point where you realize you can't tell them what to do. You can't say, well, I know better than you because I've done this. Well, you might do, but it's better not to say. And you have to wait, and you have to wait until you get asked, or but the key point really is to be there. And I took this as my message for the summer camp. I was there. I also had Layla there as a camp mother, and that was essential to bring some safety net, to pick up where there was any difficulty with dealing with the younger generation, the third generation in that case. So we came through that, and it was a much more harmonious time, and I enjoyed being there, and thinking about myself. I'm going to be a grandfather soon. So they were calling me Uncle Chris, and I said, well, next year you can call me Grandfather Chris. So there are many obstacles to building the bridges between the generations, but that connection is absolutely essential, and we build on it anyway, whether we're conscious of it or not. But we can damage it too if we're not careful. And finally, oh yes, an inspiration this morning. If we consider the past generations, all our ancestors in the spirit world, looking down on us, they'd be even more desperate that we learn from their mistakes and we build on their successes. And we do have the opportunity to do so even more than they did. Let's pray. Our dear God, our Heavenly Parent, we are in a position to learn from you. We have an opportunity to learn from the natural world around us and see so many beautiful things immediately here in our environment, in the Peace Garden, but also in the extraordinary places around the world. And we also have the opportunity to learn from history, which we can see so much more clearly than previous generations have been able to. So please help us to see what lessons we can learn. Please help us to connect together across the generations that are represented here amongst our families, and pray that the things that you want us to inherit, you want us to pass on, you want us to learn, please let those things shine brightly. I offer this prayer in my name, Christ Labar, of a blessed central family. Adieu.